Do you guys know that Fletcher-class destroyers are not only the largest destroyers the United States ever built in World War II, but were among the most successful and the only ones to sink a Japanese submarine with the same thing that nearly killed all of Ireland in 1845. Woo! Talk about a video hook you can't swipe away now. Thank you for joining me in this video explaining the history of this story and the background of the Fletcher-class destroyers. I did plan on making this on my computer, but I need to get some things in the mail before I can properly record everything and also sit down and write down a proper script that has different recording sessions. I just have a blank ass script that I'm totally going to be looking at throughout explaining this video because I have all of the necessary information you're going to love. I just haven't memorized all of them all at once. The Fletcher-class destroyers stand as a remarkable chapter in World War II history. They were not only the largest class of destroyers ever built by the United States, they pretty much immediately started cementing their legacy the moment they got off the factory line. In World War II, in the Pacific Theater specifically, they were vital in protecting numerous supply convoys and shipping lanes to help support the war effort against Imperial Japan, counteracting their Navy, their Air Force, and especially their ability to make landing parties. But oddly enough, becoming the center of the weirdest encounter in the Pacific Theater, period, ever. No one can top this. I don't care what story there is in the Pacific Theater. This was the weirdest one. The only known instance of a ship or a destroyer taking down a Japanese submarine with potatoes. Before we get into the potato wars, we gotta get into the basic rundown and the nitty-gritty of the history of the origins of the Fletcher class, why they were built, how they were built, and why it helped it become the destroyer it was. Fletcher-class destroyers were the end product of two major events and two major topics that caused a lot of frustration, especially in the naval world. The stock market crash of 1929 caused the naval industry specifically to be hit hard. Not to mention World War I just ending with World War I naval treaties. Those two combinations, the Depression and fucking naval treaties that made arbitrary size limitations on weapons, on ship sizes, and just all of this political mumbo-jumbo bullshit, which in my opinion was fucking stupid. And to be honest, Uncle Sam got tired of these fucking size limitations and limitations in general. And with the failings of these naval treaties eventually falling under in the early 30s, in 1936, Uncle Sam got to fucking work. The Naval Act of 1936 would start the immediate design and laying of the first battleship designs since 1921. And later that next year, the first battleship, USS North Carolina, was laid down. They weren't finished there. In June 1940, the United States passed the Two Oceans Navy Act. This would ask for an 11% increase in the naval fleet, increasing the size of the Navy. And if that wasn't enough, the King of the North, Chief of Naval Operations, Harold Rainsford Stark, which is the most Games of Thrones name I have ever heard, asked for another 70% increase, which Congress soon authorized in less than a month. That increased the size of the Navy by almost twice. 200 new ships would be added to the naval fleet. What you're telling me is the King of the North entered Congress like a total gangster, not only asked but informed Congress on the phrase discretionary spending, which would effectively almost double the entire U.S. Navy? Yeah, no, pretty much, yeah. By 1941, the United States Navy and Uncle Sam wanted a destroyer and a fleet of them to be able to go toe-to-toe with the Fubuki-class destroyers that the Imperial Navy would be fielding 10 years prior. The Fubuki-class destroyers were launched in 1931 for context. This would also effectively solve the issue in the Pacific, with their navy being stretched out extremely thin, being able to fill in spots while also being an effective ship. Don't get me wrong, don't say they didn't try. 2 prior designs were shit and were not continued because they were not seaworthy enough. They could not handle the extreme weathers of the Pacific. That was pretty much the 30s for the United States Navy when it came to destroyers. They suck. But now with the brand new increases in size and the failure of the naval treaties, the Navy can finally get their little hands on the perfect ship design. There has to be some meeting that took place at one time where they said, fuck that entirely, and designed a brand new ship. And designing they did. They designed an innovative and groundbreaking destroyer that had no equal in World War II. The first of many I have no free healthcare, but our military is better than yours mentality in their design. Fletcher-class destroyers and their designs were put into the 1941-1942 shipbuilding program, and they took everything the Navy had learned and suffered with throughout the entirety of the 30s, such as improved stability and seaworthiness. Most destroyers and most typical naval ship designs had a step deck design, which would have a higher deck than a flush deck design, which is what the Fletcher class actually went with. This effectively made the ship less top heavy, which helped with stability issues and made it more seaworthy. This gave it plenty of more room to add heavy equipment than other step deck designs, which made it more compact. But with it being larger, they were able to fill in and have room for newer extra upgrades far into the future. And like I said earlier in the video, this ship was built in the most beautiful time when you design an item. It was made for the right thing, the right time, the right place. It was perfect. The first 2,100-ton Fletcher class was commissioned. In terms of destroyers of the time, it was definitely the chonkiest. It was 376 feet long, pretty much dwarfing the size of, like I said, plenty of other destroyers at the time. It was also very fast. It was able to go 42 miles an hour. I know nautical miles exists. You do the math on your own. But it had the range of another 5,500 nautical miles, effectively making the fucking Pacific its own playground. The crew complement of 329 officers, it was also the first destroyers ever equipped with radar. 3 different radar systems: air search radars, surface search radars for ships, and fire and control radars for its variety of weapons. It had the ability to detect ships 10 to 12 miles away, while also being able to see aircraft 40 to 45 miles away. But don't get me wrong, yes, the Fletcher class was big, but in size comparisons with a lot of different battleships and cruisers, it was still small. That didn't mean it couldn't go toe-to-toe with them with its impressive weapon complement. Having 5 38 caliber 128mm cannons if you don't live in Freedom Land, and single Mark 30 turret covers, which had the ability to not only target air targets, but also target ships generically. With its ability to go toe-to-toe with much larger warships than itself, its long-range, high-speed ability to lay down hate on those Japanese Air Force attacks, it was perfect. It was built in the right place, right time, and motivation. But I wonder if the designers woke up one early morning in a cold sweat dreaming about how a sack of potatoes was able to score a kill on a Japanese Imperial Navy fucking submarine. Because how silly would that be, right? Right? Now we cut back to the first Fletchers ever being produced, the USS Nicholas and USS O'Bannon. Were laid down by Bath Iron Works in Bath, Maine on March 3rd, 1941. And then they were soon launched later that next year. The USS O'Bannon was named after the hero of Derna, Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon. An entirely other video I can make on in the future. On the 26th of June, 1942, the USS O'Bannon was commissioned, and after a short stint of training in the Caribbean, it immediately steamed to the Southwest Pacific to join the Battle of Guadalcanal that had been raging for a year already. While the USS O'Bannon was escorting supply ships heading to Henderson Field, which was an important airbase in Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. Out of nowhere, surfacing from the deep blue Pacific Ocean, a Japanese submarine attacked the convoy. But in quick succession and quick order, the USS O'Bannon was not only able to fight off, but scare off the Japanese submarine while the supply ships and the rest of the convoy was escaping. In another impressive feat on November 12th, 16 Japanese torpedo bombers attacked Who? Yeah, the USS O'Bannon's fucking supply convoy. And made quick succession of that shit. Out of the 11 torpedo bombers knocked out, she knocked down 4 and was able to quickly protect the supply convoy, which was still able to get its supplies on time. Suffice it to say, this infuriated the Japanese Imperial Navy and Air Force, which very quickly got a fleet of ships headed straight for Henderson Field. 2 battleships, a light cruiser, and 14 Japanese destroyers. And also suffice it to say, the Americans were completely outnumbered with only 2 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 8 destroyers. In this very short but extremely furious naval battle, both sides suffered heavily. 2 American light cruisers, in which Rear Admiral Norman Scott lost his life, 4 U.S. destroyers were lost. The Japanese also suffered, but almost worse. Now, how in the world could this be worse for the Japanese? A down and dirty destroyer from the coast of Maine just entered the chat and is wanting her pound of flesh. USS O'Bannon got down and dirty with who exactly? Goddamn battleship. The USS O'Bannon rolled its sleeves up and went toe-to-toe with a Japanese battleship. Battleship Hiei or Hiei, it's Hiei if you want to do it. I'm horrible at pronouncing these things. Which was a 728-foot-long, 37,000-ton monster. It had a complement of 8 14-inch cannons, 4 6-inch cannons, 16 5-inch cannons, a complement of 20 1-inch Type 96 anti-aircraft guns. This thing was a monster. How in the world does a 370-foot, tiny 2,100-ton destroyer go toe-to-toe with a fucking 37,000-ton battleship? It had one flaw. One flaw specifically. It can't hit short targets. USS O'Bannon was too short. It was a flush tech designed ship. And in this heat of battle, the crew and ship got so close to the battleship that the battleship couldn't just press any of her guns and absolutely laid in, causing fires throughout the battleship and enabling the ship to hit the battleship Hay with 2 torpedoes, completely fucking it up and disabling it. The ship had to be scuttled. The crew of the USS O'Bannon invented the phrase drive-by shootings. In this battle, yes, both sides suffered heavily, but the Japanese was able to be pushed back. They protected Henderson Field from being destroyed, and which was a vital airport for the war efforts in the Pacific. Yeah, I thought this video was about a fucking destroyer destroying a submarine with potatoes. Zip it. I'm getting to it. I'm getting to the starchy bits. Sit down and let's get into the real story of this video. On April 4th, 1943, the USS O'Bannon picked up a submarine on radar, oddly wandering, just meandering around. Right for the picking, the commander and captain of the ship, Commander Wilkinson of the O'Bannon, ordered the ship to ram the submarine. But as they were getting up on it, going full speed, he got a little thought in his brain, and he was like, if that's a mine-laying submarine, and I ram my ship into it, we're going to explode. So, in the last second, they turned the ship hard, pretty much canceling out all its speed, but sloshing up right next to the submarine, just like it did with the battleship. Now, the same thing that enabled the battleship to be destroyed by the O'Bannon is dealing with this submarine. None of the guns can depress low enough to hit the submarine. It wasn't until the crew of the O'Bannon peeked their little heads over the side of the ship and realized that all of the Japanese soldiers were asleep on the deck of this, unsubmerged submarine, which was great. Other than that, no one had a fucking gun. Now, one by one, these Japanese crew members are getting up, and they're now noticing a 370-foot fucking destroyer Like, I could see they could see the whites of these, either of their eyes. They're staring at each other like bewildered, like moments of tensity. The crew members of this Japanese submarine now are starting to realize they don't have guns, and they have to hurry to get to an 8-inch cannon that's on the deck of these sort of submarines. And the crew of the O'Bannon is trying to struggle to find any handguns or weapons that they could use to shoot these crew members and prevent them from getting on that 8-inch gun, which would have been able to do a pretty significant amount of damage. You don't gotta aim, it's right there. So, in this moment of panic, of these few seconds of trying to find weapons, opening up storage units, and what do they find? Potatoes. All of the storage containers that they were looking through had potatoes in them. So the only thing they could do was start lobbing fucking potatoes at this Japanese crew. Which is fucking hilarious sounding. It worked! It absolutely worked! Because the sound of potatoes hitting the side of a submarine oddly sounds like a grenade. This saved enough time for the USS O'Bannon to back up because the crew of that submarine thought they were being, like, peppered with fucking grenades. Just as the Japanese submarine was quick diving under the water, one shot was able to be slammed into their con tower, which is the sort of tower in the middle of the submarine, and it dived. The USS O'Bannon was able to make quick work of that submarine, launching depth charges and destroying the submarine then and there. Not only solidifying themselves as the main characters of their story, making the weirdest encounter that I honestly wish people would get into more nitty-gritty about that I have ever seen. This video was originally supposed to be a lot more in-depth and crazy, and maybe I can eventually get more in-depth and crazy and have a bunch of stock photos or photos that I've been able to find of the USS O'Bannon, but I had to record it on my phone, and future videos are going to have a structure to it, a formula, and I just decided to record a video when I was missing some vital equipment that really made making the video on the computer impossible. But if you liked this video, make sure to like down below and comment what you thought about it, and comment some video ideas that, here's a challenge, not other YouTubers have made of. Like Fat Electrician, I don't want to be copying him or copying other people. I want to do some weird, nitty-gritty, crazy stories that I can research and show you in dramatic senses. And yes, those later videos will be in landscape format and not in vertical format, because I recorded this on my phone, and those later videos will be recorded on a computer with a webcam and a nice microphone. But again, if you like this video, make sure to like down below, hit subscribe on YouTube, and hit follow on TikTok. And thank you guys for enjoying my very starchy story.